Donald Trump, though, has now intervened and said he wants to arrange a meeting between the two families so they can actually talk things through. How likely do you think this is going to go ahead? And do you think that Dominic Raab made a mistake holding this meeting when he didn't have any good news to offer the family?
Well, I think we know that the promises from the US president these days sadly don't amount to very much, which is a terrible thing for somebody who's as pro-American and supportive of our alliance as me to say. But sadly, it is true. Look, this is a really tragic instance, as you say, and I can't begin to feel the pain of the family who've lost a son. I mean, it's just awful, and it's one of those moments where we've really got to look at what diplomatic immunity means, because it's not supposed to mean that individuals can behave recklessly and sometimes, sadly, occasionally take a life by accident, and we have to assume it was an accident, on our roads. It's intended to allow diplomats to go around their duties without being harassed by a hostile state. Now, the right thing to do here is extremely clear, which is for this woman to return to the United Kingdom, to face justice, and according to the decision of the court, to either pay for a crime or to be found not guilty. And that's what we would expect of our closest ally and partner in the rule of law around the world. So I have to say I find it extremely sad that the United States is not doing immediately the right thing and returning this woman to the United Kingdom.
OK, thank you very much for that. Well, let's turn our attention also to what's been happening in Syria after President Erdogan of Turkey sent Turkish soldiers in to effectively take over the Kurdish-held northeastern Syria. They want to set up effectively an area, what they call a sort of a safe zone, effectively across some 30 miles, 300 miles along the border, depths of 20 miles, 30 kilometres. Of course, what he effectively wants to do is remove the people who currently live there, the Kurds there, and replace them with the Syrian refugees who fled to Turkey. We've seen effectively America just give the green light to this, withdrawing their forces, even though this is going to involve attacks on the Kurds who were until a week ago fighting alongside those US forces. We're told also this is going to possibly lead to ethnic cleansing. We could also lead to the ISIS fighters currently held, tens of thousands of them held in camps in that particular part of northern Syria, being able to be free to continue to fight in Syria and indeed perhaps return home to countries like the UK. How concerned are you, and what do you think that the British government should now do about this latest development?
Well, look, I'm concerned on several levels. The first is that somebody who should know better, the President of the United States, again, sadly, has surprised his closest allies in withdrawing troops in a joint operation. The United Kingdom and the United States were supposed to be fighting side by side. If he suddenly withdraws, then that massively changes the way that we are able to operate. And it's simply not right to surprise your friends. You're supposed to surprise your enemies in war, not your friends. And the second thing is that these people have been fighting side by side with US and UK forces for almost 10 years now. It's been more 7 years or so. Now, if you build up an alliance like that and then tear it apart overnight, what on earth do you think it says to every other alliance everywhere else in the world? If your partners find that they can't trust you anymore, because what will happen, very simply, is that we will find ourselves in other parts of the world needing support from local forces and completely unable to get it, because people will look at us and say, you're the kind of person who, when the going gets tough, you just go.
Well,
that hugely weakens the United Kingdom and the United States.
But it's
also very strategically idiotic decision.
It's, of course, going to put a lot of those Kurdish fighters at risk when they have actually, let's face it, they've borne the brunt of the pain, the bloody pain of fighting against Assad's forces. We also know, of course, this big issue about the ISIS fighters. Now, the UN are going to be holding a meeting about this, but they've basically been saying, look, it's time for Western countries to bring your own ISIS fighters home. They can't be the responsibility of the Kurds, or now would effectively be the Turks that are being held in the camps in this area, in this region, because you're going to have to bring them home. But our Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has said she's not bringing those people home. As far as she's concerned, they've got no right to their British citizenship, including even the ISIS brides like Shamima Begum. What is the solution there? If these people are going to effectively be able to be freed from their camps, and they're going to be roaming the Middle East or free to return without us even knowing, that's going to be more dangerous than basically going there, collecting the people who are British, bringing them home and taking responsibility for them here. What would you suggest?
Well, Julia, I think you've just answered your own question. I completely agree with you. The truth is, this is an absolutely awful situation. We've got some people who've done some terrible, terrible crimes and made some incredibly stupid decisions to end up inside camps in Syria, guarded by the Kurds. And as the Kurds turn and have to defend themselves against Turkey, what do you think is going to happen to those ISIS fighters who are in the camp? They'll be able to roam free. Now, at that point, we need to make a decision. Do we want them roaming free and setting up new camps, new movements around the world, recruiting more British people to go and fight overseas? Or do we want to take responsibility for those people who, sadly, we missed when they were in the UK, but now we know who they are? Bring them back to the UK and prosecute them. I mean, I think there's a responsibility here. If we don't want international terrorist organizations roving around the world, having freedom to behave, in the most horrendous way imaginable, then I'm afraid we need to take responsibility for our citizens and expect others to do exactly the same.
But isn't the problem, of course, I mean, even when the argument is over Shamima Begum, and I've always argued that she should be returned to, she's our responsibility. She was radicalised here, and whether or not she went as a child or as an adult, she is our responsibility. However, I also share the concerns of people who say they don't want these people back here because, let's face it, our legal system, our justice system is not going to deal with them adequately. They're not going to be put behind bars and de-radicalised, if that is even possible to do. They're going to be, even if they do face any charges, even if they do face time behind bars, 2 or 3 years max, and then they're back out on the streets at a risk to British people here. Do we not need to have major change in our justice system so that these people are brought back here and then are kept behind bars where they cannot cause a risk to British people?
Absolutely. And, Julia, we've spoken about this in the past. I want to bring in a new treason law because I think what these people have done is absolutely appalling. And I think we need to have the maximum punishments available. Now, in some cases, we can't prove, because, of course, these crimes happened overseas, we can't prove to the same level of evidence that we would if it were, say, in the UK, the incidents of murder and rape and vile war crimes that we would be able to prove if it happened here. Now, we need to be much better at collecting evidence on that, and we need to, I think, introduce a new Treason Act because the current one is simply not fit for purpose. And we need to make sure that we are absolutely ready to make sure that people who've done these awful things don't go to prison for a year or two, but more like a decade or two, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to control these populations, not by having them wandering around the Middle East starting again.